You wouldn't last 5 minutes. Not here. Not barefoot in frozen mud. Not under a roof made of wet straw and low expectations. Because being a Viking woman wasn't about braided hair and battle glam. It was blood. It was bone. It was boiling stew while sharpening a blade and pretending not to hear your husband snore like a dying walrus. Forget everything you think you know about strong women in history. This isn't a Pinterest board. This is survival. Before we throw you into childbirth with nothing but a wooden spoon and a prayer to gods who don't care, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy this kind of slow-burning historical pain. And hey, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Always curious to know which corner of the world is trying to fall asleep with me. Well, let's begin. You're not born in a hospital. You're not even born in a bed. You're born in the corner of a smoky longhouse that smells like boiled cabbage, damp fur, and poor decisions. The midwife? She's hammered. The floor? Frozen. The tools? Non-existent. No soothing voice. Just your mother clenching her teeth, wondering if today's the day she dies doing the most natural thing in the world. Bringing another mouth into a village that already hates winter. You arrive somewhere between a scream and a cough. There's no soft music playing. Just dogs barking, someone yelling about a missing chicken, and the wind howling through the cracks in the wood like the gods themselves are unimpressed by your entrance. No one's waiting with a warm towel. You're handed to a half-sober woman who smells like fermented turnips and regret. She holds you upside down, slaps your back, and mutters, "It's breathing. Good enough." Your crib isn't a crib. It's a goat trough. A literal wooden box, once used to feed livestock, now generously lined with scratchy wool and, possibly, a dead spider named Olga. Welcome home. If you're lucky, you get swaddled in a blanket that hasn't been washed since the last harvest. If you're not, you just get placed near the fire and hoped for the best. Because out here, fire is life. Everything else is optional. There's no baby monitor, unless you count the giant hound that occasionally licks your forehead to see if you're still alive. No one's cooing at you. No one's taking pictures. You're not special, just a statistical risk in a village where half the babies don't make it past the first week. Most won't even get names until someone's sure they'll live long enough to learn them. You get one early. Probably something like Brynhild or Freydis. Names that sound like warnings. There's no welcome to the world speech. Just a grunt from your father and maybe a nod from your grandmother, who's already lived through 5 plagues and 3 husbands, one of whom may or may not have fallen on an axe by accident. Air quotes. Your mother gets no rest. The second you're out, she's back to grinding grain and scolding your older brother, who just tried to ride a pig again. No postpartum leave. There's only more chores, and maybe, if she's lucky, a cold fish for dinner. Meanwhile, you lie there, blinking at the ceiling beams, listening to the sound of axes being sharpened and men coughing up the remains of last winter's bad decisions. This is the Viking version of a lullaby. There are no lullabies, just snoring, and the sound of someone outside trying to scare away wolves with a wooden spoon and very creative profanity. It's oddly comforting, in a way that says, if you want peace, earn it. You sneeze. No one notices. You cry. Someone tells you to hush. You fall asleep to the sound of someone vomiting outside the longhouse. It's not a fairy tale. It's your origin story. There's no priest, no ceremony, just a gut feeling that you'll survive, or you won't. And if you do, it's because the cold didn't win. Yet, The fire flickers beside your makeshift crib like it's making a bet on your odds. By dawn, you're still alive. Congratulations. You've passed your first test. The reward? More cold. And lice. And a grandmother who thinks giving you a carved bone to chew on counts as parenting. They don't talk to you like a baby. They talk at you like you're already 5. If you can't understand it, that's your problem. Viking babies don't get babied. They get built. You are not a miracle. You are another pair of hands, another mouth to feed, another tiny person who will one day carry buckets, haul firewood, and learn how to gut a fish before you can spell your name. No one will ask how you feel. No one will check your temperature. If you're warm, loud, and not purple, you're fine. And if you're not, well, there's always the next one. This isn't cruelty. It's efficiency. The village survives by not getting attached until you've proven you won't die every time it gets windy. Attachment is earned, not assumed. You're not raised with tenderness. You're raised with silence, observation, and a wooden toy knife. Not to play with, to practice your grip. And so, as the fire crackles and the dogs settle, your story begins not with comfort or celebration, but with endurance. You didn't ask to be here, but now you are. And the gods? They're watching. Not to protect you, just to see if you're worth the trouble. You wake up in the goat trough. Again. You're 2 years old now, which makes you roughly halfway to marriage and 3/4 of the way to full-blown trauma. Childhood, as you understand it, involves mud, loud relatives, and the constant threat of being stepped on by livestock. Your favorite toy is a stick. Sometimes it's a sword. Sometimes it's a wand. Occasionally, it's a disciplinary tool for smacking smaller children when adults aren't looking. You've never owned a plush animal, but you've definitely fought one for food. You share everything: your blanket, your lice, your existential dread. The other children bite. You bite back. It's how friendships are made. And ended. And made again 5 minutes later because there's only one ball, and it's made of pig bladder. No daycare. No early learning center. There's just the outdoors, the cold, and the overwhelming scent of burning fish fat. Your playpen is a mud pit. Your guardian is a one-eyed chicken with anger issues. Affection is measured in grunts. Encouragement comes in the form of not being yelled at. If someone gives you a carved wooden horse, it means they don't want to trip over your body later. That's Viking love. Your grandmother occasionally mutters that you remind her of her third husband. That's a compliment. He died in battle. Or from drinking lamp oil. No one really knows. Either way, he was tough, and you apparently have his scowl. You don't know how to read, but you've memorized every insult used during mealtime arguments. You've also learned how to dodge spoons, sharpen bones, and disappear when chores are mentioned. These are your core competences. You've never seen a mirror, but you're aware that you're covered in something, possibly stew, possibly blood, possibly both. Your bath schedule is directly tied to whether or not you fall into a fjord. Soap? You think that's a plant. Or a myth. You get sick, and the remedy is drink something bitter and sleep in a fur coat that smells like 5 different animals, none of which are alive. If you die, it was your time. If you survive, it builds character. There is no inside voice. There's yelling, louder yelling, and yelling with a stick. Your cousin once tried to reason with a goat. He doesn't try anymore. The goat won. Games include chase the chicken, throw rocks at bigger rocks, and ambush your siblings before they ambush you. Injuries are common. Apologies are rare. Everything is either a competition or a war simulation. You're not coddled. You're calibrated. Every day is a test of whether you'll grow up to hold a shield or be someone who needs to be carried. And no one likes a burden. Not even your pet spider, who's currently nesting in your shoes. Meals are communal chaos. You eat fast, fight for the last turnip, and learn early that if food hits the floor, it's fair game. If it hits your shirt, it's seasoning. Table manners are for funerals, and even then, optional. Bedtime doesn't exist. You sleep when the fire dies down and the shouting fades to background noise. If someone kicks you in their sleep, you kick back. Blankets are territory. Sleep is warfare. You've never been told you're special. You've been told you're loud, annoying, and a walking avalanche of trouble. That's the closest thing to praise you'll hear before age 10. When you cry, no one rushes over. They stare, wait, and say something like, "If you're not bleeding, get back up." Sometimes, you are bleeding. The advice doesn't change. The most valuable skill you learn isn't how to tie knots or throw spears. It's how to pretend something doesn't hurt until you're alone with the goats and can scream into your own armpit. Birthdays are not a thing. If you're still alive after another winter, someone might grunt in your direction and throw you half a dried fish. This means they care. And still, despite all this, the mud, the blood, the screaming livestock, you adapt. You become sharp, watchful, tough in all the ways that don't show. Because here, being a child isn't about innocence. It's about armor. You don't get taught. You get yelled at until you stop doing things wrong. That's how Viking education works. If you're lucky, the yelling is in your direction. If not, it's because someone already gave up on you. Your first lesson is this: if it's steaming, don't touch it. You fail immediately. Now you know what a burn feels like. Congratulations. That's learning. You're expected to understand how to use every tool before you can pronounce it. Your father hands you a blade and says, "Don't cut yourself." That's the tutorial. You cut yourself. Fire is not explained. Fire is endured. You get too close once, and your hair smells like barbecue for a week. No one rushes over. They just grunt and ask if you learned something. Math isn't numbers on paper. Math is counting sheep, counting spoons, counting the bruises you got from walking into a door beam that was not built for your height. Again, reading? Not a priority. The only runes you recognize are the ones on the stone that mean don't touch. You touched it anyway. Now you understand fear. There are no pencils, just charcoal. No notebooks, just the back of your hand, if you're fast enough. And if it rains, so much for that lesson. Most of what you learn comes from watching adults, grinding grain, skinning rabbits, sharpening things, screaming at livestock. It's like school, but louder, and sometimes bloodier. Your chores double as practical exams. Spill the milk? You don't get more. Drop the fish? Guess who's eating mud tonight? That's not a punishment. That's just lunch. Your mother shows you how to grind flour without losing your fingers. You almost fail. The cat gets some fingernail. The cat doesn't mind. You're taught to carry water in buckets twice your size. You spill half of it. You cry. Your uncle says, "Cry later. The goats are still thirsty." You carry it again. Nothing comes with instructions. If you're handed something and don't know what to do with it, you figure it out. Or you become the example people use when saying, "Don't do what she did." You practice sneaking into the food stash for extra berries. You're caught. The punishment? Scrubbing chamber pots. The reward? Those berries were totally worth it. When someone gives you a task, they don't wait for you to understand. They walk away. You figure it out mid-task, usually badly, often while something is on fire. You once helped sharpen weapons. You dropped a blade on your foot. You didn't scream. That was the real test. Your father nodded like you passed. You still limped for a week. You are tested constantly. Not with quizzes, but with pain. Not with pop questions, but with boiling water, heavy buckets, and surprise goose attacks. The goose always wins. There's no praise, only fewer corrections. If no one speaks to you all day, it might mean you did everything right, or they forgot you existed. Both are acceptable outcomes. By age 6, you can tell when a goat is about to kick. You can gut a fish without flinching. And you can lie to an adult with perfect eye contact and zero guilt. You're not learning to be clever. You're learning to survive. Clever gets you noticed. Quiet competence gets you trusted. And trust means fewer chores. Maybe you don't collect grades. You collect scars, calluses, and silence. These are your diplomas. And if no one hits you with a wooden spoon today, you just graduated. You wake up one day and the world smells different. Not just the stew. You smell angry. Your skin itches. Your hair rebels. Your bones ache like they just remembered they're mortal. There's no warning. No class. No supportive circle of elders. Just your body deciding it's time to self-destruct in slow motion while your chores double and your patience halves. Your body changes, but the chores don't. You bleed, cramp, rage, and still haul wood like it's a crown. Strength doesn't arrive. It's forced out. Some girls start braiding their hair with extra care. You start tying yours back tighter so it doesn't get in your face when you're chopping wood. Romance is not on your radar. Survival is. A few boys notice. They get braver. They flirt. Badly. One offers you a carved spoon. You ask if he can fight. He says no. You hand him back the spoon. Politely. Almost. Another tries a compliment. Says your eyes remind him of a storm. You respond by challenging him to a sparring match. He loses. He also loses 2 teeth. Coincidence? Your body changes, but your workload doesn't. You still carry buckets, clean fish, and fight off angry geese. You just do it with cramps now. And attitude. The village notices, though. Elders start mumbling things about marriage age. You start sharpening your axe more often. Not as a threat, as a boundary. You're not told what's happening. You're expected to just know. Like all your ancestors passed down this knowledge telepathically. They didn't. They passed down trauma. You start feeling things. Big things. Rage. Sadness. Confusion. And also a weird fondness for fire. You stare at it too long sometimes. No one notices. Or maybe they're afraid to ask. You train harder. Longer. Sweat replaces tears. Bruises replace explanations. When your blade strikes true, and someone twice your size stumbles back, that's the only clarity you need. Sometimes, you feel powerful. Other times, you want to dig a hole and scream into it. You do. A goat falls in. You help it out. You bond. You name it misery. It becomes your emotional support goat. No one tells you you're becoming a woman. They just stop calling you a child. Which is not the same thing. One is biology. The other is expectation. And both come with blood. There's no celebration. Just whispers. Just pressure. Just suitors suddenly showing up with fish, flattery, and zero self-awareness. You start keeping your axe closer at night. You don't get a moment of clarity. You get blisters. You get stronger. Not softer. Not gentler. Just sharper. You cry once, alone, and decide that was enough for the year. And one day, while hauling wood and bleeding through your third piece of wool, you realize this isn't a phase. It's a promotion. You didn't ask for it. But now that you have it, you wear it like armor. There's no gym, no schedule, no motivational speech. There's just a field, a stick, and someone yelling at you to stop crying and hit harder. Your first weapon is a wooden sword that feels heavier than your dignity. You swing, you miss, you hit yourself in the knee. Welcome to training. There are no pads, no helmets, just bruises, blood, and very specific instructions like don't die and try not to stab your cousin. Again. You train in mud, snow, rain, and sometimes in goose droppings. Conditions don't matter. Enemies don't wait for perfect weather. Neither do your instructors. At first, your hands blister. Then they tear. Then they bleed. Then they callous. Then you stop noticing. Pain becomes background noise. The boys underestimate you. At first. Then you break someone's nose with a shield. Accidentally. Mostly. After that, they don't underestimate you. They just avoid eye contact. There's always someone watching. Not to help. To judge. To decide whether you're warrior material or just another body for the next funeral pile. You get hit. A lot. Sometimes in the ribs. Sometimes in the pride. Both hurt. One heals. The other becomes motivation. Every mistake has a price. Step wrong? You fall. Block late? You bruise. Lose focus? You bleed. This is not theoretical violence. It's a curriculum written in bone. The older girls are relentless. They don't speak much. They just fight like they're trying to erase something. You admire them. From a distance. Your cousin spins before every strike. It's dramatic. It's also stupid. He gets knocked down often. You take notes. Then you knock him down too. Eventually, your body adapts. Your grip tightens. Your balance shifts. You don't think about where your feet are anymore. They just know. You train until your arms shake. Until your legs cramp. Until your sweat smells like regret and raw onions. Then you train some more. Your axe has a name. Not because it's cute. Because it's the only thing that listens when you talk about how tired you are. You call it silence. You sleep beside your weapons. Not out of fear. Out of habit. Because anything else feels wrong now. Like forgetting a part of yourself. One day, someone attacks from behind. You react without thinking. Elbow. Twist. Slam. They fall. You don't apologize. They don't ask for one. You've never been praised. But when the chieftain walks by and grunts, "Not bad," it feels like someone lit a fire in your chest. The goats stop challenging you. Even they know. You're not just training anymore. You're dangerous. And you like it. Victory doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like stillness. Like silence. Like finally being heavier than the fear in your stomach. And when someone asks you why you fight so hard, you don't say honor. You don't say glory. You say the truth. Because no one else will do it for me. The first boy who liked you gave you a necklace made of bones. You said thank you, then asked if he'd killed the animal himself. He hadn't. You returned it. Another tried to impress you by lifting a log. He dropped it on his foot. You didn't laugh until he started crying. That's when the second-hand embarrassment kicked in. One particularly brave fool tried to grab your arm during a feast. You smiled, leaned in, and whispered, "You touch like a drunk squirrel." The hall laughed. He didn't. You don't get flowers. You get challenges, duels, boasts, promises of land and fish and loyalty that smell more like desperation than devotion. Romance here isn't poetry, it's property negotiation. They don't offer flowers. They offer goats, flattery, and the illusion of possession. But you're not waiting to be chosen. You're watching, measuring, calculating. If love comes, it won't ask for space. It'll fight beside you in silence. There's always that one who says, "You just need to be tamed." He usually walks away with a limp, sometimes with a missing tooth. Older men watch you like you're a wild horse they'd love to break. But you've seen what happens to broken things. They get quiet. And you were never meant to be quiet. Your mother gives advice: choose one who can carry you if you're wounded. You translate that as choose no one. Learn to walk alone. Love, if it comes, will not arrive with perfume and promises. It will arrive bleeding, breathless, holding your knife and saying, "I saved this for you." Until then, you sharpen your wit like a second weapon. Use sarcasm as armor. Learn to say no in 7 different tones, 5 of which come with a warning. One day, a man will walk up and say nothing. He won't boast. He won't offer goats. He'll just hand you a clean blade and nod. You'll nod back. That's the closest you'll ever get to romance. Because in this world, affection is earned, not demanded. And any man who confuses your silence for submission is already a ghost. You don't hate them. You just don't need them. Not to survive. Not to thrive. Not to define who you are or how sharp your blade swings. They call you cold. You call it clarity. They call you wild. You call it breathing. And when someone says, "You'll die alone," you smile and whisper, "Not if I die first." It starts with a horn in the distance. Not music. Not a celebration. The kind of sound that makes your bones forget how to stand. That's your first clue. Tonight is not going to end peacefully. You grab what you can, not keepsakes, not jewelry, just blades and boots. There's no time for sentiment when fire's on the horizon and death wears fur. Your little cousin screams. Your uncle yells. Someone's goat runs in circles. You don't know if it's panic or rehearsal. This happens more often than it should. The smoke hits before the invaders do. Thick, bitter, hungry smoke that tastes like wet bark and old memories. You cover your mouth with your sleeve and pray to a god you barely like. Men rush forward, drunk on chaos. Swords swing, doors shatter, and somewhere, under it all, you hear your own name screamed, not in fear, in fury. You fight like you were born inside an avalanche. No technique, just instinct, just momentum, just survival. You don't aim to kill. You aim to remain standing. There's no honor here. No cinematic glory. Just blood on the walls, teeth on the ground, and the constant awareness that your life is only worth what you can defend. The fire spreads. Fast. You smell burnt straw, burnt meat, burnt hope. A neighbor tries to rescue his chickens. You drag him away as his roof collapses. The chickens don't make it. You stumble into the cold night, throat raw from smoke and screaming. Your hands shake, but your grip holds. The blade is part of you now. Or maybe it always was. You regroup near the river. Faces blackened with soot. Eyes wide. A child clutches a charred doll. Your friend bleeds from her arm. No one cries yet. That comes later. Then, silence. The kind that hums. The kind that presses on your ears like guilt. Your village still stands. Barely. But something in you doesn't. And then it comes. The weight. Not just of what you saw, but what is expected next. Rebuild. Lead. Feed the others. Show no weakness. Mourn only when convenient. They look at you. The strong one. The unshaken. The one who didn't fall. And now you must become something bigger than your wounds. You're expected to cook, care, clean, fight, plan, and smile, preferably all before breakfast. You're the glue holding ash together. Lucky you. You walk through the ruins, past broken pots and burned shoes, and you think, this is where I'm supposed to rise from the ashes. But ashes don't feel like wings. They feel like failure. You hold children who aren't yours. Bury neighbors whose names you only half remembered. You sharpen new blades with tired hands. No one thanks you. That's the expectation. Your strength becomes legend. Not because you wanted it, but because you didn't die. Apparently, that's enough to earn stories. And responsibility. Sometimes, you want to scream. To say, I didn't ask for this. But the fire already screamed louder. And the only answer it got was smoke. So you stay quiet. You rebuild. You lead. And every night, you sharpen your blade beside the ashes and whisper, not again. Not me. Not without a fight. Eventually, someone brings it up. Not love. Not loyalty. Just logistics. You should marry soon, they say, as if it's a deadline. As if you're milk with an expiration date. Marriage, here, isn't about happiness. It's about land, labor, alliances, babies. Mostly babies. Preferably many. Preferably sons. Your opinion is optional. You're expected to choose wisely. Which means choosing someone with more sheep than emotional depth. Someone who can build a house but can't survive in your silence. They parade suitors like livestock. This one has 3 boats. That one owns a field. Another has nice shoulders and half a brain. A good match, they say. You nod. Then walk away. No one mentions your axe. Or the way your eyes harden when someone touches you without permission. Or the fact that you've been leading raids while they've been picking curtains. You wonder if you're broken. Everyone else seems eager. You're just tired. Of expectations. Of bargaining. Of pretending you're a prize and not a storm. Some offer kindness. They smile, speak gently, offer help with chores. You smile back, but something in you flinches when the word wife is whispered. Because wife here means caretaker, cook, healer, breeder, soft hands and quieter thoughts. You have none of those things. You have scars and noise. One day, you meet someone different. They don't flinch at your calluses. Don't blink at your silence. Don't offer to tame you, only to stand beside you. That's rare. You pay attention. You don't fall in love like they say. You fall into recognition. 2 warriors nodding across a battlefield. No vows. No flowers. Just firelight and mutual respect. You set your own terms. You keep your name. Your axe. Your space. You make it clear, if they ever try to own you, they'll find out you can still swing steel in your sleep. Others don't understand. You don't act like a wife. You shrug. Maybe they've been misusing the word. Your marriage, if you call it that, looks like shared silence, split duties, and long nights sharpening blades in parallel. Not romantic, but honest. You sleep lighter now. Not because you're afraid, but because you have something to protect. Not someone to complete you, just someone who sees you and doesn't flinch. There are no rings, just rope around the wrists during a ritual. You made sure it wasn't too tight. You also kept a knife on your belt, just in case. You still get questioned, still get judged, especially by those who think obedience is love. You smile politely, then remind them that love without freedom is just captivity with better blankets. You raise no daughters to be docile, no sons to believe they're owed loyalty. You raise warriors, of mind, of voice, of spine. Sometimes, you watch the fire and wonder what it would have been like to follow the old path. The soft one, the quiet one, the easy one. Then you remember who you are, and who you'd have had to become to fit inside that silence. And you say, not with bitterness but with clarity, I chose this, and I'd choose it again. They never tell you what dying feels like. They just say, be brave, as if that's a shield. As if shouting louder than the fear will stop the blade from finding bone. Death comes early here, not as a surprise, but as a neighbor. Familiar, polite, quietly waiting its turn, watching you through the cracks in the doorframe while you're busy sharpening steel. You bury more people than you remember names. Brothers, friends, the woman who once taught you how to stitch a wound while her own bled freely. Gone. Ashes. Smoke. A name on a stone that no one visits. Every time you walk past a field, you wonder which patch of dirt will swallow you. Not out of fear, out of preparation. Because you've long accepted, this story doesn't get a soft ending. But God's help the one who thinks that means you'll go quietly. You train harder, fight smarter, and love sharper. You memorize the weight of your axe not because you fear dropping it, but because you need it to sing when it flies. You've made peace with pain. It teaches. You've befriended silence. It reveals. And you've stared at the stars long enough to know they don't answer, but they watch. One day, a raid comes not with horns or fire, but snow. A strange cold, like the kind that numbs before it kills. You feel it in your ribs before you hear the enemy's boots. Your village doesn't scream. It prepares. Quietly. Sharpened metal, braided hair, old rituals muttered under breath. Not panic. Readiness. Because everyone here knows, this might be the one. You don't hesitate. You put on your boots like armor and tie your cloak like a shroud. There's no fear, just the steady rhythm of resolve under your ribs. A younger girl shakes beside you. She's never seen death this close. You don't speak poetry to her. You just hand her a blade and say, if you're going to die, take one with you. The battle is ugly. Of course it is. No music. Just screaming. Steel meeting bone. Fire and ice and mud mixing until the ground forgets it ever knew peace. You fight like someone with nothing left to prove. Which is the most dangerous kind of fighter. You don't look for glory. You look for the softest part of their armor. Your arm gets cut. Deep. Blood runs hot. But your grip stays. Because even now, especially now, your hand knows what to do. It remembers. So do you. Someone calls your name, not out of love, but desperation. You turn, defend, strike. You're not a hero. You're a wall, a storm, an answer. Then it happens. That moment. When the world slows down, the sound dulls, and you see the blade coming, the one with your name on it. You don't close your eyes. You don't pray. You smile, because this is the price. And you were always willing to pay it on your own terms. But then, a flash, a shout. Someone pulls you back. The blade misses. You fall to your knees, alive, barely, breathing, burning, and it hits you harder than the wound. You're not done. You live, again, but not because you ran, because you stood, because you dared. And now, every breath after that moment isn't just survival. It's defiance. You survive, somehow, not because fate chose you, but because you kept showing up, day after brutal day, teeth gritted and hands blistered, daring the world to knock harder. The fires are out now. The wounds, closed. The dead, buried. You walk among the ruins with quiet steps and louder thoughts. There are children watching you, not out of awe, but curiosity. They heard the stories, not the ones about gods, the ones about you. And they wonder, how does someone become like that? You don't have an answer, just scars, just smoke in your hair and stubbornness in your veins. But if they ask, you'll say this: I never waited to be saved. They'll carve your name, maybe, or forget it. Memory is fickle. Stories get warped. But your actions, those don't burn as easily. You plant a tree where your home used to be, not because it's poetic, but because someone has to begin again, and you've always been better at building than weeping. You teach the young ones how to hold a blade, and when to put it down, how to tell the difference between fear and intuition, between silence and surrender. You keep your axe near, but your hands softer, not weak, just at rest, like a storm that's learned patience. At night, the stars look different. You no longer ask them for answers. You just thank them for watching, for not blinking when you bled, when you broke, when you became something new. Some try to label you warrior, widow, witch, leader. You nod at all of them, and at none. You're just a woman who didn't die. That alone unsettles people. You're invited to speak, to tell your tale, but you never perform. You speak plainly, like firewood cracking in a hearth, like a truth that doesn't need applause to exist. When others cry, you don't rush to comfort. You sit beside them. Let the silence do the holding. You know now, survival doesn't always need sound. There are songs about you. Some get it wrong. Most exaggerate. You let them. Let the myth grow teeth. Let the legend walk taller than you ever could. It's safer that way. But late at night, when it's just you and the coals, you whisper your real legacy. I didn't break. I bent. And I remembered who I was. You no longer dream of peace. You dream of resilience. Of girls growing up not needing to be as hard as you had to be. Of laughter not cut short by war drums. Your hands build more than they break now. But they still remember how to fight. And that memory lives in your bones like a ghost that knows its place. When the next storm comes, you won't rise first. Someone else will. Someone who watched you, listened, learned, loved you enough to try. And if they fall, you'll rise again. Because that's what you do. You don't disappear. You echo. And if one day they find your grave, let them dig deeper, not to find a body, but a blueprint. But not every civilization rose from ash and blood. Some rose from dust kissed by stars, from bricks glazed in lapis lazuli, and dreams stitched into gates, while warriors carved survival into bone. Others carved heaven into stone. And so, we leave the frost of the north, air, and descend into a heat that births myth. Where lions watched from walls, gods walked in gardens, and pride glowed brighter than any torch. Welcome to Babylon, the city of celestial gates. It starts with dust. Always. Dust that clings to your sandals. Dust that smells like ambition. Dust that once whispered across the Euphrates, long before kings tried to bottle the wind and call it empire. You arrive not as a tourist, there are no postcards here, but as a witness. And what you find isn't just a city, it's a statement, a threat, a love letter to the gods written in brick and blue flame. Barbaloo, they called it, the gate of God. And every stone screams it louder than the priests ever did. It doesn't rise. It demands. Walls thick enough to shame mountains. Streets that curve not for utility, but for procession. Every corner planned for the moment someone important turns their head. You don't walk into Babylon. You're swallowed by it. Like Jonah and the fish, only this fish wears lapis lazuli and spits gold when it breathes. And there, above the noise, the heat, the professor-shaped politics, stands the ziggurat. Etemenanki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. No metaphors. That's literally what they named it. It stretches upward not because they were building for gods, but because they were building against the gods. Heaven wasn't enough. Babylon wanted to match it. You pause at the foot of that tower and wonder, not how it was built, but why anyone thought they should. Because ambition that tall comes with a cost no brick can carry. But still, it shimmered. Even in the desert heat, even in the stench of overcooked ambition, the city gleamed like a mirage that refused to vanish. This was no accident. Babylon was performance. Politics in clay. A billboard to the universe that shouted, "We're here. We matter." And yes, we're watching the stars, but we expect them to blink back. And blink they did, until Babylon believed it was divine. Merchants whispered it in the marketplace. Scribes etched it into cuneiform. Children were taught not their names, but the name of the city, as if that alone was salvation. The gods were invoked again, and then quietly sidelined. After all, who needs Marduk when you've already built the sky? You stand at the edge of the Ishtar Gate, overwhelmed not by beauty, but by precision. Every tile a mirror, every lion a warning. Not welcome. Witness. Because Babylon wasn't meant to hold you. It was meant to haunt you. Before the towers, before the poetry, before the lions with glazed teeth, there were stones. Just stones. Baked, stacked, cursed at, and forgotten. By everyone except the hands that made them. No one builds a celestial gate without breaking a few backs. And Babylon? Babylon broke thousands. It started in silence. A stretch of flat land too dry for dreams and too loud for sleep. Men and women were dragged here with promises, chains, or nothing at all. Their job? Make dirt eternal. They worked from dusk to dust, shaping mud into memory. Not for their own names, those were erased, but for kings who wouldn't even visit the kill. Every brick was stamped, not with the name of the maker, but with the name of the ruler. Because ownership in Babylon was sacred, and people were not owners. They were extensions of ambition. The sun didn't rise over Babylon. It glared at it, as if even the sky questioned the audacity of stacking clay toward heaven. There were no lunch breaks, no employee of the month. Just fingers cracked open like fruit, lungs blackened by smoke, and a quiet understanding. You're building something you'll never live in. But still, they built. Because something about shaping the future, even when it doesn't belong to you, keeps people from shattering. The ziggurat grew. The walls thickened. The avenues straightened like the back of a soldier told to stand taller than his fears. And underneath it all, the bricks remembered. They remembered the songs hummed between lifts, the curses muttered under breath, the silent tears swallowed beside the scaffolding. You can feel it in the seams, if you run your hand slow enough along the old stones. Historians talk about design, alignment, urban planning, but no map shows the real weight of the city. The weight of people building, meaning they'd never be allowed to touch. Children were born in its shadow, learned to speak before they learned to rest. They ran barefoot across roads their mothers had carved. And when they asked, "Who built this?" the answer was always, "Not us." But Babylon wasn't ashamed of its hierarchy. It flaunted it. The higher the wall, the lower the worker. And still, every stone fit, every inch aligned, every step calculated to make the powerful feel taller. Some ran, some revolted, most just breathed slower. Because survival, in Babylon, wasn't about freedom. It was about not being crushed between the mortar. And yet, despite the cruelty, despite the forgotten names and broken backs, the city held. Because the clay were honest, even if the empire wasn't. Today, tourists walk its ruins, snapping photos beside shattered gates. But the bricks? They're still watching, still humming, still hot with memories they were never asked to forget. Because Babylon didn't just rise. It was raised, by hands that never got to see the view. You think it's a city, but it isn't. It's a theology in disguise, a sermon made of stone. And the closer you look, the less freedom you see. Babylon wasn't planned. It was dictated, not by urban engineers, but by gods with fragile egos and kings pretending to hear them. At the center of it all, Marduk, chief deity, divine bureaucrat, celestial strategist. He didn't just rule from the heavens, he micromanaged street angles. The city layout wasn't random. It was a ritual. Every corner pointed toward something sacred. Every courtyard aligned with a solstice, an omen, or a king's insecurity. You could get lost here, not because the roads were confusing, but because they were designed to confuse you. Control disguised as geometry. Temples rose like thrones, and the streets bent to accommodate them. Nothing was allowed to block the view of the divine. Even your life. People lived in shadows. Literal ones. The sun touched the palaces and ziggurats, but not the clay homes packed like apologies at the edge of every procession route. If you stood in the wrong place, you interrupted the ritual. If you walked the wrong direction, you dishonored the city. Even breath had choreography. And that was the point. If you control the rhythm, you control the rebellion. No one revolts when they're too busy trying to walk correctly. Inside the temples, priests whispered into silence and called it guidance. They read entrails like spreadsheets. If the sheep liver smiled, trade continued. If it frowned, someone disappeared. Even the gates had hierarchies. The Ishtar Gate welcomed royalty and war stories. The lesser ones? They welcomed everything else. And by welcomed, we mean filtered. You weren't just walking through a city. You were walking through a cosmic filter. A maze designed to separate the pure from the tolerated. The rich never got lost. Their routes were direct. The poor wandered, by design. Because disorientation breeds dependence. And Marduk? He never had to raise a thunderbolt. He just watched you walk in circles, until you believed the pattern was your idea. Even today, when archaeologists draw blueprints of Babylon, the paths don't line up with logic. They line up with obedience. Because in Babylon, the shortest path to the divine was the longest road home. It gleams. That's the first thing you notice. Not the height, not the lions, not even the gods. Just that impossible, shimmering blue, the kind that doesn't exist in nature. You stand beneath it like a worshipper, not of Ishtar, but of spectacle. This gate wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep attention in. Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and complicated moods, lent her name to this entrance. But don't let that fool you. This gate isn't romantic. It's militant theater. The lions pacing its walls aren't symbols of protection. They are warnings. Power with teeth, cloaked in enamel. You don't walk through the Ishtar gate. You pass judgment under it, measured by color, posture, and whether or not your sandals dared to scuff the sacred tile. The walls whisper stories, not of devotion, but of discipline. They're covered in dragon serpents and bulls, animals no one in Babylon had ever actually seen, which made them perfect mascots. Exotic, terrifying, entirely fictional. Because fiction, when repeated enough, becomes law. The gate stood at the head of the processional way, a grand street that only felt grand if you were walking it with guards and trumpets. For most, it was just another road to nowhere. You could be executed for defiling the gate. You could also be ignored for respecting it too quietly. Babylon didn't just want submission. It wanted performance. Every festival, every royal parade, every victory lap passed through these walls. Not because it was practical, but because symbolism paid better than strategy. And the people watched. Always watched. Because watching was safer than speaking. And the gate, as beautiful as it was, never promised protection. Only surveillance. To love Babylon was to memorize the rules. To fear it was to understand them. The gate itself was reconstructed in Berlin, in pieces, behind glass. Still blue, still glowing, but silent now, as if even it grew tired of lying. Because in truth, the Ishtar gate never kept enemies out. It kept hope in check, a monument to control, dipped in beauty like poison in wine. And as you walk away, it doesn't feel like leaving. It feels like being watched from behind, by lions who've seen too much. Because Babylon never needed walls to trap you. It just needed a gate you couldn't forget. They call them the Hanging Gardens. But no one's quite sure they ever existed. Which makes them the perfect Babylonian invention. A fantasy so elaborate, it didn't need to be real. It just needed to be believed. You hear the stories. Terraces of lush greenery blooming above dry stone. Water lifted by endless machinery. Palm trees kissing the sky while empires burned below. But you won't find vines here. You'll find silence, cracked stone, and historians arguing over poetry disguised as engineering. Because in Babylon, truth was secondary to spectacle. If you could imagine it, a garden floating above the desert like a dream, then that was enough. The empire would build it in your mind, if not in brick. Still, palaces did exist. Many of them. Grand, echoing, absurd things, built for kings who wanted to hear their own footsteps amplified by marble. They weren't designed for comfort. They were designed for submission. Hallways so long you forgot your purpose. Ceilings so high you questioned your relevance. Every wall was inscribed, not with wisdom, but with names. Over and over. The king's name, repeated like a prayer with an ego problem. And if you were allowed inside, you weren't special. You were decor. The luxury wasn't for you. It was for the ambassadors, the enemies, the gods who apparently needed gold-plated furniture to pay attention. Even the beds were ceremonial. You didn't sleep in them. You performed rest for the eyes of the court, for the rumors of the city, for the illusion of divine order. And while the nobles dined on imported delicacies, thousands lived in alleys without shade. They didn't resent the palaces. They just tried not to look up too often. The paradise was maintained by people who never got to walk in it. Gardeners, slaves, soldiers, concubines, all building a fantasy they'd never taste. And if the gardens did exist, they were not gifts of love. They were bribes, built for a homesick queen, perhaps, or maybe just for propaganda. Either way, they bloomed under pressure, because Babylon didn't nurture. It curated, and what it offered in beauty, it stole in silence. Every leaf dripped with irrigation, and with the kind of loneliness only a palace can produce. Today, tourists search for proof. Fragments, foundations, evidence that the hanging gardens once kissed the sun. But what they're really looking for is permission to believe in beauty born from empire. And Babylon? It lets them. Because a lie, repeated long enough and carved in stone, becomes just another kind of paradise. They tell you Babylon worshipped goddesses. Ishtar, Inanna, the divine feminine, power cloaked in perfume and prophecy. And you believe them for about 10 minutes, until you meet the real women, the ones without statues, the ones whose names were never etched in clay. The ziggurat stood tall like a spine, straight and unyielding. And inside, the sacred chambers, the offerings, the smoke, the echoes, and the women, not citizens, symbols. Some were priestesses, yes, but not all wore silk and incense. Some bled behind veils, traded in prophecy, and memorized the sacred texts, only to be silenced by the men they taught. The temple wasn't a sanctuary. It was a stage, and every woman was given a role: virgin, oracle, seductress, scapegoat. Rotate as needed. Ishtar demanded worship, but the men demanded interpretation. And somehow, she always ended up naked, while they stayed robed in righteousness. There were rituals. Some involved sex. Others involved silence. Most involved pretending that consent was the same as devotion. The highest-ranking women were called Nattu, devoted to gods, forbidden from marriage, cloistered like relics in temple compounds. Their power? Ceremonial. Their freedom? Fictional. Some carved their own paths. Scribes, midwives, merchants inside markets. But even then, every move was watched, not because they were dangerous, but because they weren't supposed to exist in those roles. And yet, they did. Quietly, furiously, in layers of coded defiance. They raised sons who became kings, and daughters who became rumors, and memories that refused to fade. When Babylon fell, few wept for the queens. Fewer still remembered the women who scrubbed the altars clean. But the ziggurat remembers. Its shadows still hum with voices not quite silenced. And sometimes, if you pass the ruins at night, you'll hear the whisper of sand brushing stone. A lullaby, a warning, a voice too old to lie. I was not a goddess. I was a witness. Kings don't start out as gods. They start as children, screaming, spoiled, and surrounded by people too afraid to say no. And then Babylon gives them something dangerous. An audience. Enter Nabuchodonosor, or, as he preferred to be remembered, Nebuchadnezzar II, builder of empires, tamer of cities, humble servant of Marduk, who just happened to act like Marduk's boss. He didn't inherit Babylon. He multiplied it. Towers, walls, temples, gates. If it didn't glitter, it wasn't finished. And every stone whispered the same thing. He was here. Not once. Not metaphorically. Repeated. Stamped. Etched. Like graffiti made holy. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't just building a city. He was building immortality, one layer of brick at a time. Historians talk about him with respect. Architect, strategist, king of kings. But peel back the gold leaf, and you find something simpler. A man terrified of being forgotten. He didn't write love letters. He wrote decrees. He didn't seek approval. He demanded worship. He commissioned temples with his own name in every corner, just in case the gods had short memories. And when he dreamed of trees that touched the heavens, he didn't ask what it meant. He assumed it was about him. One story says he lost his mind, wandered into the wilderness, lived like a beast. Maybe he did. And time moved on. The mud dried. The axes rusted. The echoes of Viking storms faded into libraries and lullabies. But the fight, the quiet fight to stay human in inhuman times, never really ended. Centuries later, in a cramped room above a spice warehouse, another girl picked up a pen, not a sword. She didn't sharpen steel. She sharpened silence. No war paint, just paper. No battlefield, just a diary. Her world wasn't cold from snow, but from fear. A fear that crept under doors, wore uniforms, and knocked with lists. And while history burned cities, books, and lives, she wrote. Not because she was safe, but because she refused to vanish quietly. Her name was Anne, and her war was survival without being seen. You don't walk into the annex. You vanish into it. One step off the stairs and the air changes. Thinner, cautious, almost like it's holding its breath for you. Like it knows you're not supposed to be here. Not alive. Not loud. Not dreaming. The first rule of survival is silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that hums. The kind that presses against your ears and makes every heartbeat feel like a threat. Shoes off. Voice down. Breath soft. The space is small. Not poetically small. Just inconvenient. Cramped. Bent ceilings and doors that moan like they remember better days. The kind of space that shrinks over time, not from walls, but from weight. There are 8 people here. 8 bodies, 8 minds unraveling in sync. 2 families, 1 dentist, a cat, and 1 teenage girl with more thoughts than places to put them. It smells like potatoes, books, and dust that's forgotten it was once alive. The sunlight filters in only when allowed, peeking through curtains pinned with fear. Every ray is a risk. Every open window, a gamble. Outside, Amsterdam moves. Bicycles rattle. Bells chime. Boots march. Inside, nothing moves unless absolutely necessary. Even coughs feel like confessions. And watches the world through a slit in the curtain. Just enough to see the chestnut tree sway, or the neighbor hanging laundry, or a child who doesn't know what it means to disappear. The attic becomes her only sky. The walls, her only theater. Mice are more free than the humans here. The creak of a pipe becomes a symphony. A sneeze could be a death sentence. Time doesn't pass. It pools. One day leaks into the next like spilled ink. Unmeasured, unclean, unremarked. They measure weeks by potatoes, by ration coupons, by the sound of the radio when they're lucky enough to hear it. She bleeds through pen, not throat, because paper doesn't interrupt. Paper doesn't shush her. Paper doesn't get afraid of how much she feels. The house becomes a body, each floor a ribcage, each door a clenched jaw. It doesn't protect. It traps. But it's all they've got. Sometimes, she aches to know if her silence ever echoed loud enough to be heard. Ever bold? Ever curious? The silence doesn't answer. It never does. This isn't a home. It's a holding space for breath. A liminal place between presence and absence. Between still here and already gone. And yet, she still decorates her corner. She still hangs postcards. She still writes Dear Kitty like the world is listening. Because hope, stupid, stubborn hope, refuses to starve. In this house that doesn't breathe and exhales. Quietly, carefully, and somewhere in that exhale, a story begins. She doesn't remember the first sentence. Just that it came out of her like steam from a boiling pot. Sudden, necessary, invisible. A sentence not meant to be heard, only recorded. That's how it starts. She calls her Kitty, a name soft enough to whisper. A friend with no voice, no judgment, no risk. Kitty doesn't interrupt. Kitty doesn't sigh. Kitty never tells her to lower her voice. The first time she signs a page with yours, and it feels like magic. Not because she's being read, but because she exists on purpose. The diary becomes her other window, not to the world outside, but to the world she's still building inside. In a place where footsteps feel fatal, her thoughts are louder than the attic beams. She dissects the room in ink, its habits, its hushes, its human clutter. Their habits, their smells, their quirks and tempers and ration-counting obsessions. He maps her own mind with a courage borrowed from no one. The pen moves when her mouth can't, because saying I'm scared out loud might fracture someone else. But writing it, that's allowed. That's hers. No one sees her in this space. They see a child, a burden, a body. But Kitty sees her rage, her fire, her sarcasm, her crushes and criticisms and longing to be more than the girl who hides well. She jokes about farting potatoes, then ponders the nature of humanity 2 lines later. She complains about her mother, then aches for her approval before the ink dries. Outside, the world breaks, but inside this notebook, and builds something the world can't touch. Words become her rebellion. Not loud, not sharp, but unrelenting. She imagines being a writer, not because she wants to be famous, because she wants to matter after she's gone. She wants someone, someday, to know she was more than silence. I want to go on living even after my death, she writes. And then closes the book as if that sentence didn't just change the future. Kitty becomes her mirror. The only one that doesn't distort her. The only one that doesn't call her dramatic, or naive, or just a girl. She rereads her entries sometimes, amazed that they came from her. In this place where nothing grows, her mind is blooming like spring under snow. No applause. No teacher grading her. No one even knows the words exist. But they do. And she learns that survival isn't just about not dying. It's about not disappearing. Ink, for her, is not a door. It's a flag planted where she refuses to vanish. She's 13, going on 30. Not in the way girls joke with lipstick and heels, but in the way her eyes already know too much. Outside, children play in streets she can no longer walk. Fear is the language of adulthood, and unwillingly fluent. She watches her mother shrink, not from hunger, but from exhaustion. A woman breaking slowly beneath expectation and confinement. And Anne, sharp-tongued and sensitive, learns to both resent and pity her. There's no space for softness here. No room for tantrums or rebellion without consequence. Growing up in hiding means skipping the awkward parts and heading straight to ache. She begins asking questions no one wants to answer. What does it mean to be Jewish if the world hates you for it? What does it mean to become a woman in a place where there's no mirror, no moonlight, no celebration? Her body changes anyway, not with joy, but with confusion, discomfort, and silence. No ceremony, no welcome to womanhood. Just cramps in a room full of tension and too little soap. She reads philosophy under a blanket, writes about politics between bites of stale bread, wonders if any of this will matter if no one survives to remember it. Sometimes she laughs, loud, defiant, real. The others flinch. Joy sounds suspicious in a space where grief is always waiting in the next room. She talks to Kitty about things she can't say aloud. Jealousy, anger, guilt, dreams, boys, death. Kitty never interrupts. Kitty never tells her to grow up. She writes, I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder. And then she writes what no child should have to. Yet, when I look up at the sky, I somehow feel that everything will change for the better. That hope, that impossible, unreasonable hope, becomes her rebellion. She chooses to believe in goodness while hiding from those who've abandoned it. The annex isn't a cradle. It's a crucible. And Anne is reshaped daily, not into a woman, but into a witness. She carries the burden of being the youngest in a world that no longer protects the young. Too small to stop what's coming. Too smart not to see it. And still, she writes. Because that's the one thing she can control. The shape of her thoughts, even if not the shape of her days. She ends one entry with this. I don't think of all the misery, but of the beauty that still remains. And for a moment, behind boarded windows and borrowed time, she is not old. She is infinite. It doesn't arrive with music. No flowers. No fluttering violins. Just a glance. A quiet shift in the way she sees him. Peter. He's not a prince. He's not even particularly graceful. But he's there. In the same silence. In the same hunger. In the same floating space between childhood and whatever this is. At first, she mocks him. He's awkward. Mumbly. Always looking down at his shoes as if they might carry him somewhere else. But then he looks up, and something in his eyes says, I know. Not the specifics. Just the weight of it all. They don't date. There are no candles. No cafe. No long walks. Just a narrow stairwell, a stolen whisper, and the terrifying intimacy of being the only two teenagers in a house that no longer believes in futures. Their love isn't loud. It's a hand brushing another by accident. A conversation held in glances across the dinner table. A shared hatred of silence. They kiss once, clumsily, gently. Not because they're in love, but because they're human. And in this place, even that feels miraculous. And writes about him like his sunlight cracking through the attic beams. Not perfect. Not forever. But warm. Real. Something she didn't think she'd feel again. He talks about the outside world like it's a rumor. She talks about the inside of her mind like it's a labyrinth. Together, they find a rhythm, brief, broken, but theirs. Sometimes, he holds her hand and doesn't let go. Other times, he pulls away too fast, afraid of needing something he can't keep. She wonders if he sees her, truly sees her, or if she's just the only option left. She writes about this too, because honesty, even painful honesty, is the only space she owns completely. They talk about what they'll do after the war, after the hiding, after the world remembers how to be kind. She wants to be a writer. He doesn't know. Just not this. They imagine futures like people dying of thirst. Imagine oceans. Not because they believe in them, but because they have to. And yet, even here, even in this tiny, suffocating space, there is softness, and never calls it love. Not out loud, not to him, but to Kitty, she confesses everything. Every heartbeat, every hesitation. Because loving someone in hiding is like planting flowers in a locked drawer. You water them with your breath and hope the dark doesn't win. Sometimes, she doubts. Sometimes, she aches. But mostly, she's grateful that something so human could grow in a place built for silence. And when he gives her a kiss on the cheek and says nothing else, she doesn't ask for more. Because here, in this cage, even a heartbeat shared feels like a revolution. You don't learn stillness. It learns you. At first, your body protests. You shift in your chair, tap your foot, whisper when you shouldn't. You pace until someone snaps, because motion feels like proof of life. But the annex does not reward movement. It listens. It punishes creaks. It memorizes your habits and turns them against you. Soon, you learn to sit still. Not like meditation, like survival. Like playing dead in a world that hunts noise. The days bleed into each other. Morning becomes afternoon, becomes potato peeling, becomes arguing about crumbs. Time doesn't pass. It thickens. The clock ticks too loud. The wind feels intrusive. Even your stomach growling feels like betrayal. And begins to study silence like a language. She catalogues footstep sounds. Remembers which floorboards complain. She knows which spoon scrapes loudest, which window sighs. The adults argue in whispers, always about food, or noise, or politics, or nothing. Every raised voice is followed by regret. Every silence is coated in tension. Meals are rituals now. Bitter coffee substitute. Half a carrot. Bread that crumbles like paper. They chew slowly, not from manners, but to make it last. She archives glances, silences, sighs, as if collecting proof of presence. She studies her mother's tired hands, Mr. Dussel's routines, Margot's quiet ache. She notices what people hide in stillness. The cat meows once and is immediately shushed. Even the cat must learn discretion. Because here, fear wears slippers and walks on tiptoe. Sometimes the radio speaks. Low volume. One ear pressed to the speaker. News from a world that feels less real than the dust on the windowsill. And tries to stretch time. She reads, writes, thinks, stares, waits. It's the waiting that hurts most. Waiting for a knock, a scream, a war, a change, a tomorrow. The walls press inward. Not because they move, but because your mind starts to echo inside itself. She watches the dust dance in the sunlight and wonders if it's freer than her. If it remembers wind, trees, laughter without consequence. There are days when no one speaks. not out of anger, but because they've said everything before. Words wear out quickly in captivity, and finds meaning in the stillness. Not joy, but meaning. She writes that laziness may appear attractive, but work gives satisfaction. And in the smallest chores, peeling potatoes, washing up, folding clothes, she creates rhythm. Stillness stops being a prison. It becomes a frame, a discipline, a canvas. Because when the world outside moves only to destroy, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay still and remain whole. The war never knocks on the door. It seeps in through the walls. You don't see it, but you feel it, in the way the floors vibrate when something explodes far away, in the way the air changes when someone outside screams and presses her ear to the radio like it's a lifeline. Static, then words, then silence. News arrives in fragments, half-truths, rumors wrapped in fear. They say the Allies are coming. They say the camps are real. They say a lot, and they say nothing at all. Sometimes the world feels impossibly far, as if the annex is floating above reality, tethered only by breath and imagination. The front page of a smuggled newspaper tells of bombings, executions, curfews, and reads it like it's fiction. Because how else can a 16-year-old process genocide? There are footsteps in the alley, loud, measured. Everyone freezes, eyes wide, hands trembling. But the boots pass, this time, and looks out the attic window, just a sliver. She sees children playing, people cycling, a woman carrying flowers. And it infuriates her that life still exists while hers is on pause. A Dutch collaborator is shot. She overhears the whisper, wonders if justice means anything when innocence dies just as easily. The family downstairs listens to black market rumors. The family upstairs debates whether they should have fled sooner, and listens to both and trusts neither. She doesn't write about the war like a child. She writes like someone who knows history is being carved outside while she's trapped in the margin. There's talk of gas chambers, of deportations, of trains filled with names that vanish. She wants to believe it's exaggerated. Her pen hesitates, but only for a moment. One day, they hear gunshots, closer than usual. No one speaks for hours, and looks around and sees people shaped by fear, bent by it, carved hollow by it. She wonders if courage can grow in such soil. The world outside forgets how to mourn. Too much death, too fast, too daily. Even grief gets tired. She dreams of walking again, of hearing birds without suspecting they're warning her of something worse, of being anonymous. But every letter she writes is a defiance. Each page is a scream in slow motion, not to be rescued, but to be remembered. The war rages on, and the annex stays still. But inside her mind, whole cities rise and fall. She writes, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." And for a moment, the war outside loses ground. It starts as a rumor, a low hum, a cautious glance, a word mouthed rather than spoken. Normandy. The Allies have landed. Across the sea, someone is fighting back. And for the first time in years, the silence inside the annex isn't just fear, it's anticipation. The adults try not to show it. They still count potatoes, still ration soap, still argue over sugar, but their hands tremble a little less when they pass the salt. And feels it in her chest, like breath returning after too long underwater. Like maybe, just maybe, the waiting might end before they do. They talk about it over the dinner table. Quick, hushed sentences. They're advancing. Paris might be next. Maybe September. Maybe sooner. And lets herself imagine again. Not freedom, she doesn't dare go that far, but the possibility of movement, of air that isn't borrowed, of shoes on pavement, not floorboards. She starts writing faster, as if trying to outrun fate, as if the war might read her diary and spare her for how beautifully she observes it all. Peter smiles more. Margot hums while folding clothes. Even Mr. Dussel stops criticizing dinner for a whole week, and dreams of going to school again, of walking into a bookstore and seeing her own name on a spine. Not famous, just real, just alive. Her pen doesn't beg to be read. It offers something small, something human, and she means it. Every word, every silent syllable. But hope in the annex is fragile. It enters on tiptoe and shatters easily. A neighbor is arrested. A black market contact disappears. A plane crashes nearby. Reality claws its way back into the room like a wounded animal, and folds her hopes like clothes she can't wear yet. Neatly, carefully, she tucks them beside her pen and keeps writing. Because hope, even when it hurts, is better than numbness. Better than forgetting how it felt to imagine. She knows the danger of it. She knows hope can make you softer, slower, louder, but still, she chooses it. Not because it's safe, but because without it, the silence wins. Hope whispers, and listens. It doesn't come with warning, not with thunder, not with fire, but a knock. 3 hard, deliberate knocks. The kind that don't ask. The kind that know. Time doesn't stop. It evaporates, and looks up from her writing. The pen slips. The ink bleeds. The silence around her folds in half. Footsteps. On the stairs. Not soft ones. Not familiar ones. Heavy. Measured. Legal. No one speaks. No one breathes. This is the moment every cough tried to avoid. The one every whisper rehearsed for. Shoes scramble. Hands tremble. A window closes too loudly. Otto reaches for his coat. Edith reaches for the children. And Anne just stands still. Peter turns pale. Margot bites her lip until it bleeds. Someone whispers a prayer with no God left to hear it. The bookshelf moves. The one that kept them safe. The one that pretended this wasn't happening. It shifts, and with it, everything else. Voices now. Foreign. Commanding. Not questions. Orders. They come in like shadows with badges. Calm. Practiced. Almost bored. And watches from somewhere outside her body. As if her soul backed away first, unwilling to witness what her feet won't run from. Papers. Shouts. Bags. The annex, once a cage, once a womb, is stripped of secrecy. It is no longer a secret. Just a crime scene with warm plates and unfinished sentences. And doesn't cry. She looks at the desk. At her notebook. She doesn't reach for it. She knows they won't let her take it. She knows that if it stays, maybe something of her will stay too. They're led down the stairs. One by one. Like ghosts exiting a story they weren't finished telling. Outside, the sun is shining. Mocking. The world didn't pause. The birds didn't notice. The city still breathes. Inside the annex, the air lingers. Thick, bruised, interrupted. The house doesn't breathe anymore. Not because it can't. Because no one's left to teach it how. And then, nothing. No more ink. No more entries. No more "do kitty." The diary ends mid-breath. No goodbye. No closure. Just silence. They take her to Westerbork, then Auschwitz, then Bergen-Belsen. Each place colder than the last. Each one less surprised to receive her. Her hair is shaved. Her name replaced with a number. The girl who once feared being overheard now becomes someone they stop listening to altogether. There's no privacy here. No attic. No hiding. No stolen kisses or attic windows. Just filth. Illness. Hunger that gnaws louder than memory. Margot dies first. No ceremony. No marker, but a body on the ground, light as paper. And follows days later. A wound beside a wound. A silence beside a silence. She dies not knowing her diary was found. Not knowing her voice would one day reach millions. Not knowing she had already survived in the only way that matters. In Bergen-Belsen, no one calls her brilliant. No one praises her metaphors or her aching clarity. She is just another cough in the dark. Another shadow lost in the pile. But the silence after her is unbearable. The kind that makes you lean in, because something precious just fell. Her father returns. Alone. He reads her words like someone digging through rubble with bare hands, hoping to find breath. Page by page, she lives again. In sentences too honest for her age. In questions too brave for her time. In hope too sharp for the world that extinguished it. The diary becomes a voice louder than the boots that silenced it. Not vengeful. Just undeniable. Because even though and died in a place built for forgetting, she wrote in a way no one could erase. They tried to remove her. They failed. Because silence, when filled with truth, becomes immortal. The pages survived. Not all of them. Some were smudged. Some torn. But enough to matter. Enough to fight back. Her diary wasn't meant for history. It wasn't written for museums or documentaries. It was written because silence was unbearable, and no one was listening. But now the world reads it. In classrooms. On monuments. In quiet corners where girls still wonder if their voice is too much. And didn't want to be a martyr. She wanted to be a writer. A teenager. A friend. Someone who made people laugh, then made them think. In that order. Her words never ask for pity. They demand memory. They ache to be remembered, not for the tragedy, but for the tenderness inside it. She is not a statistic. She is the breath between paragraphs. The wit in the margins. The bravery disguised as curiosity. Her diary ends in 1944, but her presence does not. It lingers in the ink. In the quiet gasp after a sentence that feels too close. Too alive. Too now. The house still stands. Visitors walk its narrow halls, holding their breath as if the air remembers her. Maybe it does. People cry in her room. Not because she died there, but because she lived so loudly in a place that begged her to vanish. She once wrote, "People can tell you to keep your mouth shut, but that doesn't stop you from having your own opinion." And with that, she became eternal. The Nazis couldn't erase her. Time couldn't dilute her. Even death, sharp and merciless, couldn't silence her pen. Because some stories are carved, not told. Some voices are inked into the spine of the world. Anne Frank? She didn't disappear. She remained. As ink. As echo. As proof. So now, we close the book. Gently. Not because the story ends here, but because some stories are too alive to finish. And Frank didn't ask to become a symbol. She just wanted to be heard, to be remembered not for the attic, or the silence, or the war, but for the laughter, the sarcasm, the dreams that refused to die quietly. And maybe, as you sit here now, eyes still, breath softer, you realize you're not just reading history, you're holding resistance. One girl, one pen, one voice the world tried to erase and failed. So if you feel something, anything, don't rush past it. Sit with it. Let the silence speak. And when you're ready, open a new page and keep her echo alive. Yours, still listening. Yours, still burning. Yours, still writing. Good night.